All right, hey everyone. I'm with the director of the documentary, The Bad Patriots, Victor Fraga. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, Alan. How are you?
Good, good. I saw The Bad Patriots, and I'm like, we should have done this a week ago. Yeah, tell us, what is the basic story behind The Bad Patriots?
Yes. Well, The Bad Patriots is a documentary. It's basically it's a three-way conversation between myself, Ken Loach, and Jeremy Corbyn, and about media bias, about censorship, about manipulation in the UK and worldwide. It's I'm a British Brazilian publisher. So I'm a journalist, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an exhibitor. I do a lot of things. So go to a lot of festivals with him. I made a documentary a few years ago called The Coup d'etat Factory, about the role that the media played in deconstructing Brazilian democracy and helping to stage successive coup d'etats throughout the history of Brazil. Following a coup d'etat that removed Dilma in 2016, a huge lawfare campaign that ended with our current president Lula in prison a few years ago. So I did that film showing that the media are highly manipulative, are highly biased in Brazil, blah, blah, blah. I've been based in the UK for 27 years. I realized that things in the UK, in the so-called developed world, are not as balanced and as people like to believe. The UK is often looked upon as a model of media balance. It isn't. So I got together with Jeremy Corbyn, who is the former leader of the Labour Party, a man who nearly became prime minister in 2017, when he was narrowly defeated by the incumbent prime minister then, Theresa May. So Jeremy identified with my first movie, the Coup d'etat Factory, because he has a strong connection with Latin America. He had two children with his first wife, a Chilean woman, and he's currently married to Laura, who's Mexican. He visited Brazil at the time of the dictatorship in the late 60s. He protested on the streets. So he was very much connected to my first film. We screened the film. We talked about the film. We did several panels. Then we thought, why don't we have a conversation with Ken Loach, who, in my opinion, is the biggest voice of the working class in world cinema. He's the man who has had most films in Cannes in history, the only British, 15 in total, the only British person to win Cannes twice, and someone who's been vilified by the media. So both Jeremy and Ken have been vilified by the UK media. They are described as terrorist sympathizers, as communists, as bad patriots, as the film title suggests. So I sat down with them and I asked them, what's this all about? Jeremy has been in Parliament for 4 decades. Ken has been making films for 6 decades. And they've both been expelled from the Labour Party under accusations of alleged anti-Semitism. So the film was recorded briefly before October the 7th, where the topic of anti-Semitism and how it's weaponized to silence voices of the left was already very prominent then. I also spoke to Noam Chomsky, who's going to be the subject of my third film. I intend to do a trilogy of Dirty Media trilogy. So the first one on Brazil, the second one on the UK, which is The Bad Patriots, with Ken and Jeremy, and I intend to do a third one with the interview I conducted with Noam Chomsky while he could still talk. He's since had a stroke. He's unable to talk and to write. So it's a worldwide phenomenon, and Ken, Jeremy, and I try to understand whether the media are intrinsically against the left, whether why how communism is still instrumentalized. Communism doesn't even really exist anymore, does it?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that you know, it's like it feels like the world is behind the United States in this, because you know we of course have the McCarthy era, where communism was the weapon, and while it may have rooted out people who were real communists, it attacked a lot of people who weren't and who were more tangentially associated with it. And the thing, so we didn't talk about each other's politics before starting, but I'm not a socialist, but at the same time I've been disillusioned by both parties. And I'm just curious, because it's not discussed in your film, but there were a lot of elements of what you and Jeremy and Ken had discussed that resonated with what's going on here with the most recent election last week. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of, you know, being on the outside and observing this last presidential election?
Yeah,
in context with your film.
Yeah, well, it is terrifying. That Trump got elected, because he's a madman. He's deranged. He tried to stage a self coup to perpetuate himself in power. He's a narcissist. He's a rapist. He's a compulsive liar. He's a dangerous, very, very, very dangerous man. So I have no sympathy for Donald Trump. How did he get elected? Are there similarities with what happened in the UK? I think it's very, in Brazil, I think it's very different. In the UK and in Brazil, the media tends to be, it's owned by, mostly owned by millionaires. Even the Guardian in the UK, I worked 7 years for the Guardian as a business analyst. They like to call themselves left-wing, progressive, and independently owned, because they're run by a trust, Scott Trust, but they're not really that independent. They really they have a very liberal agenda on the social side. So the identity, they embrace the identity movement very wholeheartedly. But the media in Brazil and in the UK are very much against any sort of change, any government that will really make them pay their taxes, which sniffs of socialism. So the US is a lot is a lot different, because I wouldn't call the Democrats left wing. As you pointed out, I mean, you're not a socialist, and but based on what and very few people in the US will describe themselves as socialists. It's still a dirty word. I mean, Bernie is kind of changing that.
Yeah.
But it's still a dirty word in the US. So was it the media that destroyed Kamala? I'm not entirely sure.
See, I guess from my observations, you know, you can feel however you want about Trump, but it just seemed like a lot of the tactics used against him were very similar to the ones used against Jeremy and Ken, in the sense of, you know, you're digging. You know, you could talk about the broad actions, the more public actions, but you know, there was a sense that, you know, they were just digging for anything to kind of connect him with. You know, we kept hearing him being called Hitler, you know, and then, you know, using the law as a way to kind of, you know, make him, you know, basically try to disqualify him, as opposed to just running an election, letting ideas just go out there, letting Trump speak for himself and letting the American people hear what, you know, what he has to say, crazy or not. And I felt like that the tactics being used that you point out are not irrespective of party, but it's more aligned to power. You know, I always feel like politics is that is the attainment of power, and you do what you can to hold on to it or to get it. And as you mentioned in the documentary, it's the dirty tactics that we use, or that the media and the politicians use to attain and hold on to power. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, well, I think with Trump, it's slightly different. I wouldn't say that the media are anti-Trump.
I don't think that helped him. Definitely either.
Okay, well, I'm not in the US, so I don't watch Fox News.
Hmm.
I don't have access to the channels in the US. If Trump presents himself as anti-establishment, which is a very common tactic. Which is used by the far right across the planet. Well, Stephen Bannon mastered that.
Hmm.
People, be that Victor Orban in Hungary, not so much Putin, but I would also call Putin a deranged madman. Um, Trump has a lot in his favor. It's the type of manipulation in the US is a lot more sophisticated. We're all familiar with the Cambridge Analytica um, affair, which enabled him to get into office in 2016, despite losing the popular vote. Um, I don't see a parallel. Glenn Greenwald, who I know very well, has a view not too different from yours.
Hmm.
He thinks he helped to dismantle the media judiciary political conspiration that ended up with Lula in prison in Brazil. You know Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah.
He's American, obviously Pulitzer Prize winner. He's lived in Brazil for a long time. He was married. He's a widower after his Brazilian husband passed away.
Hmm.
Tragically passed away a couple of years ago, and he was instrumental in Brazil and in getting our democracy to survive. He's been heavily criticized now for cohorting, for um, for giving interviews, for comparing the situation in Brazil to the situation in the US,
Hmm.
yeah for suggesting the same thing that you're suggesting, that people like Trump are being persecuted by the media. I mean, it's difficult to persecute people with the media should persecute people with so much power and money. Jeremy and Ken are a poor man. They live very modestly. They don't
Well,
have.
Ken's a documentarian. He's not exactly making a lot of money doing that.
What's that?
Yeah, Ken is a documentarian. There's not a lot of money in that field.
No, he's not a documentarian.
Oh,
He's made a few
that's right.
documentaries, but no, he hasn't made a documentary in about 30 years. And his two films that won Cannes, neither one of them were documentaries. But he's just a person who doesn't quite think the people who have socialism in their hearts, and I don't call myself a socialist. I'm not a Marxist. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist. I'm a left wing person. That's how I would describe myself. Probably they live very modestly because money is not a priority for them. I mean, Jeremy is often described as a millionaire. He's got like a penthouse. I've been to Jeremy's house several times. He lives very modestly.
Hmm.
Someone like Trump has an enormous amount of money and has someone like called Elon Musk on his side. So I think, and he has Fox News on his side. He has all the right-wing networks on his side, and well, in 2016 he had Cambridge Analytica on his side.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of mechanisms to which Trump and Stephen Bannon and others have, and he crafted that image of an outsider. A gentleman called Nigel Farage did the same in the UK, who is the main actor behind Brexit. He presented himself as an outsider. He's now in Parliament. His party had about 15% of the votes. He presents himself as an outsider, as a man of the people, and the contradiction speaks for itself. There's a picture of Farage and Donald Trump in the US inside an elevator entirely made of gold, doing like this, saying that they are men of the people. So I will. I would disagree with you. I don't think Trump in any way whatsoever is a victim of media manipulation when he's got a huge establishment on and several channels on his side.
Yeah, and he won too, so
yeah,
that's not quite the victim either.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of, you know, I'm just curious, but in terms of your audience for your film, you know, what is it that you're trying to, you know, to bring up? You know, I do remember Jeremy Corbyn, at least from the news reports we got, and how close things got and how heated things got. In terms of, you know, what was kind of, you know, in terms of your conversation with Ken and with Jeremy, were you just trying to kind of figure out what's going on, or, you know, were you guys kind of going in with a kind of, this is what we believe is happening in the world, and this is what's happening in the media and politics?
Well, you know, they were talking about their personal experience. So Ken explains how his films have been censored, either directly, actively, or more subtly. Simply, they wouldn't show his most controversial films on TV. Oh, it's not commercial, we're not going to show it. So, and Jeremy talks about how he was repeatedly vilified, and they've both been expelled by their own party, by their own, on accusations of anti-Semitism.
Do you know why? I mean, you know, it's weird that your party would do that to you.
Because support for Palestine is a no-go in the US and in Europe. It's beginning to change because the level of depravity in Israel is just staggering. So now people can criticize Israel. I know things are changing in the US. Bernie Sanders is particularly vocal. It took him a while, but he became vocal. But in order to discredit anyone who is vaguely progressive in Europe and in the US, not so much in Brazil, you accuse them of anti-Semitism. Because there's something called the IHRA. The IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, has a definition of anti-Semitism. It's got 11 items, and it says that it basically equates any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And that definition was created in 1998 in the United States. There's nothing to do with Israel. It's nothing to do with the Holocaust. It was created in the US in 98. And since that was created in 98, people no other religion benefits from having a piece of a document or which, when people want to turn into legislation, which literally criminalizes any criticism. There's no such a thing for Christianism or for Islam. So yeah, the way they treat anti-Semitism on both sides of the Atlantic, the way anti-Semitism has been instrumentalized is what caused Jeremy Corbyn and Ken Loach being expelled from the Labour Party, which receives an enormous amount of money from Israel. In the past, purely stating that the AIPAC and that the IHRA have a lot of power was considered anti-Semitic. I mean, the mere debate around anti-Semitism is considered anti-Semitic. So that's how extreme it is. I'll give you an example. When I was talking to Noam Chomsky, I asked him, no, now that I've spoken to you, to Ken, and to Jeremy, could you please put me in touch with Bernie? I'd like to talk to Bernie.
Okay.
And he said, Victor, I haven't spoken to Bernie in, not exactly these words, but something to that effect. I haven't spoken to Bernie in 20 years because people around him think I'm too toxic. Both have been accused of anti-Semitism. Of course, both are Jews. Bernie Sanders is Jewish. Noam Chomsky is Jewish. He lived in Israel in the 1950s. So, yeah. So, the weaponization of anti-Semitism is your answer.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, so So where's the film at now? Are you on the festival circuit? I
Yeah.
think it just premiered. How did that go?
Yeah, well, the premiere went really well in Brazil. I mean, obviously, me being Brazilian helped a lot. So got got some good conversations, some media coverage. It's not an A-list festival, but it's the biggest festival of Brazil.
Yeah.
So it's a significant festival, and it's going to premiere in the UK between February and April. Don't have the exact date, but it's going to be and I cannot tell you the details just yet because it's not a public announcement yet. But yeah, you'll be showing in the UK, and yeah, it'll be available for streaming. I've been sending it to festivals. I know my film will struggle with some of the big festivals precisely for that reason. It's very difficult to be critical of Israel, and particularly in the way I am. My film has already been, ironically, my film in Brazil never suffered any sort of censorship in Brazil. Bad Patriots in the UK is being a victim of censorship by a large institution. I'm not going to say who they are, and yeah, and that's obviously very ironic because the UK likes to think of itself as a role model of democracy and of media balance. It isn't.
Yeah. And how about the United States? Have you had?
Yeah, the United States are a lot freer. I mean, you take your amendment very seriously. Yeah, so the United States. Yeah, you can hold a sign, say God hates. But funny enough, you couldn't until recently you couldn't hold a sign asking for the genocide of Palestinians to stop. I mean, that's changing with all the students. So in principle, the United States are more free. But obviously, there's a lot of very sophisticated mechanisms that, I mean, you mentioned McCarthyism yourself. So obviously McCarthyism was the censorship mechanism. So while you have the First Amendment, it is the First Amendment, isn't it? The one about
freedom of speech, First Amendment.
Yeah. So okay, so yeah, despite the First Amendment is a wonderful thing. I mean, I welcome that people should say that God hate, and if they want, they can go on the street and say that. So I welcome that. That is very Foucault, isn't it? I'll support your right to say what you want, regardless of whether I agree with it or not. But there are other sophisticated mechanisms that prevent people from speaking up, as McCarthyism, as you pointed out, and or the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. I mean, I have to believe you shouldn't have any problems. You may get demonstrations, but you wouldn't have any problems getting screenings.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've only sent my film to a couple of festivals, in the literally a couple, as in the British sense, in 2 festivals. I don't think the US. I wonder how the film will resonate in the US. When I do my film with Noam Chomsky, there should be a little more interested in the US. Ken is not particularly well known in the US, which is something we discuss in the film, because Ken is extremely well known everywhere else in the world, and in the US, he's not that well known because his films because social realism isn't, as he explains in the film, it's not about a man with a gun who sorts all the problems. The language of Hollywood, the way the US has used cinema for geopolitical purpose, with geopolitical objectives, does not fit in very well with the message that Ken is trying to convey with his films. So his films are not that successful in the US. But remember, he's literally the man who has had most films in Cannes in history. He's the biggest voice of working class, and people in the US, I mean, yourself included. And I'm not.
I mean,
Well, you're American, and not.
Yeah, I know. I've heard the names, but I've not seen a lot of
that
it.
in a negative sense. I don't mean
Yeah.
that. There's wonderful artists and wonderful cinema coming from the U.S. But that's one point of the film. My film. Why is it that someone with such an extensive filmography, known extremely well from Brazil to China, is so from Japan? He mentions is very well known in Japan. Why is he an obscure figure in?
I mean, I have to believe that it's not necessarily the message of his films, but it's the marketability of his films. You know, it's I think that's always going to be the hurdle here in the United States is, they want to make money off of it. They're less interested in putting a film out there that has a social message unless it can bring an audience in. And it, if clearly he hasn't been tested well, or they haven't tested him enough to say, he'll never play in the United States. But these are, like you say, tough subjects that the masses, the ones paying the dollars, don't necessarily want to go out of their way and see.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's so much the commercial element, because he makes his films are very profitable in the UK. Their box office hits all over Europe.
Sure.
In Brazil, where I'm from.
I mean, I'll tell you, he's not the only. He wouldn't be the only one.
Audience sensibility. I think American audiences are not used to social realism. I think it's a type of language that's very. It's very European in its essence. So I think it's very and Ken explains. I think the words he says is, I think he says it's anathema to a capitalism, and my films. He says my films are not about a man with a gun sorting all the problems. They're not manipulative, and none of that. I'm being honest, Alan. I don't mean that in a negative way. I have a
no, it makes total sense.
I love American cinema. Your country has produced some of the greatest artists in history. I mean, I don't even know where to start in terms of American filmmakers who I love, from John Waters, David Lynch, and there's so many. So I'm not being demeaning.
No, believe me, we talk about this all the time. The Hollywood system is not, it's meant to produce films that make billions of dollars, and the independent films, the smaller films, are almost ignored. But I like to think that Hollywood on itself is kind of imploding, and that's where films like yours come in. And what the thing I appreciate about your film is just the idea of this free exchange of ideas, the idea that both Ken and Jeremy can speak from their experience, from their heart, and what they think. And that I think we as people, when we hear viewpoints that don't agree with ours, that kind of hammer ours, and will either cause us to consider what we believed, is it still true today, or will it just reinforce it? And I think that's it's weird. His films just won't make it from the Hollywood system, but it has a chance if you could figure a way to kind of bring it out independently and kind of find the audience through that mechanism.
So but that would require some fundamental change in the US. It would be good to see Hollywood imploding in a way, and new talent, a new language being created in the US, because the industry is just so regimented that we're seeing fewer and fewer truly original filmmakers, and that isn't just in the US. I mean, I go to all of the big festivals, all of the so-called A-list festivals. Most not all of them, are all the European ones. And I'm in Venice this year. It was all with the exception of one film, a Georgian film called April. All the films in competition were highly conventional, highly commercial, made for an American audience, because this
Yeah.
is still the biggest market. It does get a bit boring when everything is so formulaic. When you can see films have gone through a million pairs of hands, a million labs. And in the US, I don't know how funding works very well. I don't know very well how funding works, because obviously you don't have public money, but still the industry is highly regimented. And in countries like the UK and Brazil, we have public money. In Brazil, nearly all of the cinema is publicly funded, but it's highly regimented. In order to apply for funding, you need script it in a very specific format. You need to tick a million boxes, and
I mean, the US, I mean, there's the Hollywood studio films. That's the films you guys get, the formulaic superheroes and the action and basically dramas that are up for Oscar contention. And in terms of funding, there's a little bit, but I think is that making a movie in the United States is much more easier and affordable than ever. And so now it's up to real filmmakers, independent filmmakers, to claw and scratch for every dollar they can and make the movie they.
What is it you call an independent filmmaker? Can you?
It's basically anyone who is making a movie outside of the Hollywood system.
Okay.
And clearly they don't have money. But there are production companies who can, produce films for like 10 to 20, $30 million. But it's usually around the $7 to $10 million range that a lot of these independent films are made at.
Yeah, that's the budget of in Europe or in Brazil. That's the budget of mainstream film.
No, our budgets are 120 to 200 million dollars. And that's that's what they send your way, and that's hoping that the Brazilian, the Chinese, the international market will help cover a lot of that cost.
Yes, and you are successful. I mean, the US has used cinema very eloquently, more than any other country in the world for, well, not for 100 years, but for about 100 years.
Yeah, I'd say 100 years.
I mean, other countries have a very different sensibility and have done they do incredible cinema, like France, and they do have a lot of protectionism in France, and French cinema is incredible. You've got a few smaller countries which have a very singular sensibility, like Iran, but these countries, obviously, I mean, expert audiences will go watch French and Iranian cinema, but they're not going to go into the multiplexes. So no country in the world has achieved what the US has, and obviously that fits in very, very well with imperialism. But other imperialistic nations haven't achieved that. I mean, the Russians never did. I mean, Soviet cinema or Russian cinema, I mean, there are wonderful filmmakers. They are masters of visuals, but people don't go to multiplexes to. They never did. They never went to multiplexes to watch Russian cinema, Russian or Soviet cinema. So it's so.
What's interesting is I don't think filmmakers today want to study the classics. You talk about France and you talk about Iran and a lot of countries. Just the beauty of their films. And I feel like we've lost that in terms of our films are not exactly beautiful anymore. I just watched a documentary about Alfred Hitchcock and his methodology of making movies, and it's like we've lost this art that was happening in Hollywood, decades ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Hitchcock was a master. He is the greatest filmmaker of all time. I mean, and it was thanks to Hollywood. I mean, he was born in London. He was British, obviously, but it's thanks to Hollywood that he became the most important filmmaker in history. But it's you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's very difficult to subvert the establishment in the US. And I get sad to see like people like John Waters, who I love very dearly, who I met, who I interviewed a couple of times. he won't do a low budget film anymore. You're never going to get Pink Flamingos or Multiple Maniacs, and he's doing now Lion Mouth, which is because he finally got what is it, an 8 figure sum or a 9 figure sum. I don't know what to make that. I mean, he's been I feel bad that he's not that we don't get anyone like John Waters anymore. John Waters is he's still great, but he's not making low, but he's no longer challenging the establishment. So
right, and the problem is when you give someone like John Waters a massive budget, the studio now has control. Yeah, and that's the problem. With money comes control. Yeah, and the lower, the less you're willing to take, the more control they're willing to give you.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I've got a very filmmaker, a very close friend of mine. He's a very successful international filmmaker. He's not American, and he's been offered a very large sum to make big films in Hollywood, and a fraction, literally less than 10% of that, to make his film in Europe. He opted to do it in Europe because he has more artistic freedom. So I'd like to think that things are going to change in the US. Well, what do you think, Alan? Are you just happy to get those massive, super expensive blockbusters and it's highly regimented industry, or would you like to see?
I'll be honest. These last years, I've been bored out of my mind. This is the first year where I haven't seen my favorite movie yet. Because we've got the awards coming up in January, and I've just not seen anything that I would say is worthy of, to say that I want to see this over and over again, or to say that this film touched me in a significant way. That hasn't happened this year yet. It happened once last year, and then 2 years ago it didn't happen either.
Which film was that? Do you mind if I ask you?
Yeah, last year was American Fiction.
Okay, I actually haven't seen that.
That's a comedy with a lot of heart and something to say about it. Basically, it's about race relations in America, and it takes a very interesting take on it. The writer got the Academy Award last year for it.
Okay, and which one was the year before that you said?
There was. I can't even remember the year before. The year before, it's like, what's your top 10? I go, I can give you my top 5. I can't give you my top 10. Yeah. And this year, I'm just seeing, like, I just saw Gladiator 2, and I'm like, we're losing the ability to make great films.
Is that the one where dinosaurs in? No.
That's Ridley Scott.
No. I'm mixing things up because the
Park is what you
I recently been to Malta, which is where they recorded both Jurassic Park and Gladiator. So that's why I'm mixing things up. It's with Russell Crowe, isn't it?
This is the sequel to that one. Yeah, and I'm like, even Ridley Scott, I feel like he's kind of losing. I don't know what it is. Maybe
he did Napoleon recently, which didn't get very positive reviews. Did it?
Yeah, that was fairly mixed. Napoleon, but at least I got what he was going for, and I was
And Alien is a masterpiece. It's one of the most subversive films in the history of cinema. It's a feminist movie. It's it deals with body horror, the male fear of giving birth, and of oral penetration. That's what he himself said, that the face huggers and the chest busters were. And there's a lesbian touch in that film in the final scene between the Sigourney Weaver and the creature. And I mean, that film is so subversive on so many levels. I mean, you also did Psycho in 1960, which to me is the most subversive film ever made. And I can't see anything happening right now. I'd like to think I'm wrong, but
that's just it. The fact that we have to go to the past and talk about the great films then and not have anything to be able to say today, just says something about where this is where the commercialization of films has ruined movies. because you're trying to appeal to the masses as opposed to speaking to.
Yeah, I think so as well. So who is the American director on who you have most faith at present?
Oh gosh, well, he's not even American. I think Christopher Nolan is up there.
Oh, he's British American, isn't he? Yeah,
I think so. I think it's his wife.
He's both. He's British American. He considers it. Yeah, he's like.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the films that. I mean, Oppenheimer. I didn't think I was going to like Oppenheimer, and I really liked Oppenheimer. How about you? I mean, I love
Barbie. I love Barbie. You know, I thought Barbie was a lot of fun, and I thought it was. I run a company called Dirty Movies, and by dirty I mean subversive, thought-provoking. So those are the qualities that I seek in film as a journalist and as a filmmaker. So I thought Barbie was very interesting, peculiar, colorful way of challenging the patriarchy. So I did like Barbie, very mainstream film. I don't like Oppenheimer at all. What did I see? I mean, May December was all right, but it's not a film that moved me profoundly. What else? What else have I seen in recently? I mean, there's always Cronenberg, who's Canadian, but he's making his films in the US, isn't he? I think Shrouds is an American film, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about the substance? I mean, is it a French film or an American film?
It is it's an American film, but written directed by
by Coralie Farge. It's wonderful. Yeah. I think
it is wonderful.
Is an incredible film. I loved it.
Again, that's a film that uses this genre of body horror and has something to say about it.
And it goes to extremes. It's grotesque. It's willfully grotesque for the purpose of exposing body fascism. I think it does it extremely well. It's beautiful. It's not beautiful. It's grotesque.
There are elements of beauty. It's everything, and that people don't like the ending. I love that ending.
I love that ending. Yeah, I love everything in that film. A lot of people didn't like it. But I think you need to make an omelette. You need to break some eggs, don't you?
Yeah.
So, I like the substance a lot. Yeah, that's probably, if that's an American film. That's one I liked a lot.
Well, I consider, it's kind of like what is an American film? Is it because it took place in America and it features an all-American cast, or is it because it was made by Americans?
Well, it's to do with production, isn't it? So there are definitions whether I mean, the Almodovar film, The Room Next Door, is a Spanish film.
Yeah,
despite being entirely made in the US. Julianne Moore is very American. It still qualifies as a Spanish film. Did you see The Room Next Door?
I didn't know.
Almodovar's latest film with Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton, which won the Venice Film Festival.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's come out yet. I think I might have a screener somewhere, but I haven't seen it.
Yet. It's his first feature film in English ever. So, as Almodovar has made films in Spanish his entire life. So
we just had an exhibit of his over at the Academy Museum.
Which city exactly are you based, Alan?
I'm in. So, in general, I'm in LA, but I'm on the county next to it in Orange County, just south of it.
Okay. I don't know that side of the US. I've only been to the East Coast, and the Great Lakes and all of that. So I still need to visit LA and see do the Tangerine tour. That is another wonderful film. Really, masterpiece, Tangerine. Did you see Anora?
Yes, I did.
That
one was very good too.
It's very good, but it's not as good as Tangerine. Tangerine is what I call a dirty classic. I use the word dirty abundantly to mean to being subversive, and Tangerine is a masterpiece in many ways. So, occasionally
it's interesting. I wasn't necessarily a big fan of Red Rocket, but Florida Project I just saw recently and couldn't help, but I was sobbing at the end of it.
Yeah, Florida Project is very good. I haven't seen Red Rocket actually, so I don't know how it's not. Yeah, I heard different things about it. So yeah, and Anora is good, but yeah, it's very well made. It's very finely acted. It's fun, but
to me, it's the ending. The ending of Nora is what got me. And you know, and we're little. My wife's not much into films like that, but she really liked Nora as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, I hate to cut this off, but I do have to go. But I want to thank you for.
It was a very long conversation, much longer than I expected. So thank you for your time, Alan.
Absolutely, and good luck. Good luck.
Well, if you do happen to put anything in writing, do let me know, because that's always helpful with festivals in the US and so on. So I can send it to the couple of festivals to which I submitted the film. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time, for listening. Okay.
All right. Thank you.